Alright guys, let's switch gears to the rally car now. We're waiting on a few things for the Forester. So we have 2 weeks before the Kentucky Gravel Rally, as I mentioned before, and then only 2 weeks prep before Bristol. So we've got some things to do to this car. Let me show you what we mean. So I briefly talked to you guys in the radiator video about the changes we've made for the radiator, and that's good. I've also been running this Killer Bee AOS, which is nice, but I was never really a fan of how this thing was cocked facing that way. You may have seen in a previous video, and then this line here tended to rub. It actually sits over here. I have it shoved down right now, but it was sitting over here and it rubs on this clamp here, and I was worried that we would have an issue with that. And then this one kind of looped around over here and went over there. So I've already spun this cap around so it goes over here, which means that this hose can run over here. And then this one, I was gonna cut the barb off the end here and have a 90 welded on it from Chris at Rise Fab, but I got to thinking about how this works, and I didn't want to mess up the Venturi effect or however this cyclone works here. So I messaged Nick at Killer Bee and asked him if I could do that, and he said that the runner needs to be this length, but I could add a 90 after it. So I've got a 90 coming tomorrow, a brass one, and it's going to 90 straight over, and then that hose is going to run down, and then I got another 90 here so that it goes straight across and over. That way it will keep it from rubbing on the hood and solve that issue. Otherwise it's working great. Next task at hand is to figure out how we can stop losing brakes in the rear. So we lost brakes in the last stage of Sandblast Rally again, which I was wondering how that happened because I have these nice wheel scrapers now. But unfortunately a rock got caught in there and it actually bent this tab up, so I just welded it, as you can see. I don't know if that'll focus, but I just had to weld that back together, and then I'm going to replace the plastic wiper, as you would call it, which is just like ABS or UHMW, whatever you want to use. So I welded that back. I'm going to replace that. I think that would have solved the issues. However, I may make a cap for one of these because I'm getting really tired of having brake issues on this car in the rear, and it's all been since I moved to 4-pot 2-pots. So I'm gonna make sure that these are dialed in. I'm gonna get our new wheel, slide it over here, make sure the scrapers fit really nicely with the new wheels that we're running. And if I have an issue again, then I'm probably gonna go back to the metal rear calipers because I don't have the issue up front, and that's where I'm getting most of my stopping pressure. So this one is gonna be, we gotta do what we gotta do because we need brakes. So what I need to do next though is these mud flaps that I made. They worked really well. However, I don't like the design of them being this far back because then the paint of the fender gets a lot of abuse, and there's also no protection in here. So I ordered these urethane sheets from Rally Nuts online, and they're pretty big sheets, and they're kind of big enough where they can go in and up for a while and still have this inch and a half of side protection, and then bracket onto the frame. Now when I made these brackets, they were angle iron, or not angle iron, they were aluminum angle. The problem with that is that the bending force when they're at 90 degrees, when I hit something, it's easy to close the gap rather than spread it open. So these would either need to face the other way or they need to be reinforced. So I found these clamps or brackets, whatever you want to call them, that have reinforced edges on them to do the same thing. So I'm going to take all the mud flaps off. I'm going to use the urethane ones and have them in the fender liner and then bolted to the edge on the front and rear. So it does suck for these new fenders because there's going to be extra holes right there, but whatever, it's a rally car. I don't want this part to get all eaten up. And the reason I'm doing that is because I need to add fender liner protection in here because stuff comes off the wheels and goes up front. That's why I was running the radiator shroud, because I had stuck sticks through the radiator before. So if I'm going to be using stock fans again without the shroud, I need to make sure this is all sealed up. And I want to make it a two-piece where it's covered from the engine down here, but also from the bumper up front, and then I can block off behind the fog lights and make it a little more aerodynamic and keep air from kind of going in here. But you can't make this all one piece because this bumper is designed to move if I hit something with these. If the plastic is fixed to the fender liner, then it's all going to rip off. So the fender liner needs to come down and maybe rest on top of the flat piece for the bumper, and that way they're two separate pieces, but it works together. So this is going to take a while. This is probably going to be a multi-day video. I did get 2 sheets of thin UHMW. This stuff is amazing. It's pretty expensive, but I got some cutoffs from Piedmont Plastics, which is a local distributor here, and they're pretty thin. I was running thicker stuff right here, but it's a little hard to mold. So I got, this is 1/8 inch here. So I should be able to use a heat gun and mold this even easier to get up in the wheel well liners. So let's get to work. Alright guys, let's take 5 from the time lapse and show you where we're at. You probably saw some grinding and welding over in the corner here. So before we started on that, I remembered that this piece got torn off at Sandblast. Luckily we got it, but I needed to duplicate it. I also noticed that at some point one of the weld nuts that we use under the car, not under the car, yeah, under the car, these things, I noticed that one of these was broken off up front, and that's most likely why this piece has that curl in it down. It got forced down with mud and then ripped off. So that piece was stripped out, so I ended up cutting it off the car. It has an extension from the transmission tunnel. This is the old piece. So I cut it off the car, and you can see it's broken off there. And then I found a new piece, and I welded a new weld nut onto it. Not my best welding work, but it's good enough. So this piece I'm going to weld back onto the trans tunnel under there, and then I can thread it back in. So that'll hold nicely. I'm going to let that cool down for a couple minutes. Otherwise, it's pretty good. I've got, and I'll show you guys this on how to build a rally car. We'll go in more in depth. Maybe I can borrow my friend's lift and really show you guys like where we mounted these, why we run plastic underneath everything. But for a quick look, if we go into the car here, we have plastic running from, basically the skid plate goes to past the, this is a 6-speed, but it goes to just past this, and it kind of tucks up here. And then we have plastic running all the way down the car, all the way to the back bumper on both sides. So this piece normally sits up and shares an overlap with this piece overlaps this one, that way no mud gets in from the top. So this front one was the one that ripped off. So you can see I have some weld nuts already on the car, but the one that broke off was right there. So I clean that metal up, and I'm going to weld that ridge out, and then I can put a nut up there. That one's bent as well, but that one might still work. So that's where we're at. And then after this, we're going to move on to the underbody protection. Probably do the front first because it's more important than the rear. But like I said, this is going to be a multi-day project, so we'll see where we get after this. Alright, we finished the underbody protection. It's pretty good. It's not the greatest solution, but it works pretty good, and it's allowed the car to survive for 4 years with relatively minimal damage. As you can see, I don't have rocker cover like Kevlar pieces, so this is really taking a toll on the car there. That's what would have happened underneath the car if we didn't have that protection. So what we need to do is figure out how to encapsulate this. So with the skid plate on, there's access to the headers there, and then this front up here collects a lot of air. So I kind of need to mock it up with cardboard first. I was going to try to line this entire fender, but I don't really think that's necessary. I think the only thing I really should do is fill in this here so that it doesn't go into the door gap there and then into the cabin here. So maybe put a piece of UHMW down here. And then over here, I need a piece that goes from here down and stops, and then the one from the bumper will sit flat. So this piece could go and sit on top of the bumper one, and that way it won't fling stuff up. So I definitely need to put the skid plate back on to mock it up, and then I kind of need to do some cardboard and see where everything wants to fit. wanted to interrupt today's video real quick and remind you that on our website we have these awesome sweaters and we have these shirts. We also have key tags available. And we have a bunch of other colors on our site. This is the royal blue as well as the sweater that I showed you. The fit is pretty nice. Logos turned out good. We have them in neon yellow. We have a Forester version of the shirt. Sweaters, there's face masks on there, which nobody really needs anymore, but if you do want a face mask, they turn out pretty good as well. And the key tags, you'll have to message us directly because they're not on the t-shirt site. But just wanted to let you guys know what we have available on the site still. Crew shirts just got released last week. They're on every 2-week shipment, so if you place an order, they collect all the orders for 2 weeks and then they ship them out, so it takes a little bit longer. All right, back to the video. Well, I'm glad that's on a time lapse for you because this is taking forever. I really hate doing this. There's a million other things to do, but it's got to get done. So, I used some CAD, cardboard aided design, to figure out what I wanted to do here. I mentioned to you guys that I didn't want to do the whole wheel well. So what I've got here is, see if you can see that. The cardboard kind of goes in line with the stock fender, so I can use 1, 2, 3, there's one behind here, four fixture points here, and then it kind of goes up the wheel well. It's taped together right now, so it kind of follows up, leaves the shock hole open, comes down, and then this should actually be against the fender a little bit more, but it had to cut a slit out for that. And then it will come down to the bottom here. And the goal is, like I said, this bottom piece will be fixed to the fender, this piece will be fixed, or this bottom piece will be fixed to the bumper, this piece will be nut-serted to the car, and this will just sit on this so that they're technically separate pieces if the bumper gets ripped off. Like, these won't be affixed to each other. All right, guys, the more I think about this design, the more I kind of want to ditch the whole thing, even though I've wasted all day on it. I just don't think this is feasible to make quickly and replace it. It looks nice. I don't really think it needs to cover all this. I mean, we've been rallying without complete fender liners for a while. The main issue is stuff getting into the header over here, which this still doesn't really block. And on the other side, the wiring harness goes through the fender, so I already have a piece of UHMW over that, and that seems to be working. So, I don't know, I need to think about this. I might pick this video up tomorrow. I have this in, and it works pretty well. It's kind of just tied to the bumper. It can't really go down because of the skid plate, so that could stay. I honestly just might use a piece of metal to cover this up, because the problem with plastic is it's so close to the header that it melts the plastic. I've done that 2 or 3 times already and it's melted it every time. So I'm kind of leaning towards just putting metal up there. I don't really like having metal in the wheel well area, just for in the event that a tire touches it, but if it's way up there, there's no way the tire is going to hit it. So I might just do that and then leave it be and not mess with any of this. I could nut-sert a few fresh holes in there and just put a piece of that thin sheet metal there. This is part of fabrication and racing with non-traditional methods. Like, sometimes you don't even need to worry about fender liners, and in a stock car you could just put the plastic stock ones up and it's no problem. But I actually did order 2 sets of stock GC fender liners just in case. I can zip tie them up in there. Maybe they won't hit the tire with the suspension dialed in, and then they're like $6 on Rock Auto, so that could be a cheap option. Just throw a stock set in there if they get ripped. No big deal. But if I want this to be closed off, I think I need to make it out of metal and just leave the back part open for the sway bar and let the heat dissipate that way. All right, guys, day 2 of the build here. What initially made me want to do the full fender liner is a lot of the big name cars are like skinned all the way, but the difference with those cars is that when they were building the car, the fender liners were smoothed and shaved and everything is out. So it doesn't really work for a normal car like this, and there isn't really a lot of wear in here even after 4 seasons of rally. So I think I might make I already have the UHMW in the other fender that has the electrical harness, So I think I'm just gonna close off so that stuff doesn't get into the motor there, leave some room for the sway bars for moving around tarmacs, and call it, do the rest of the season on this car. And then when we get the new car in, back from the cage, like I said earlier, I'll put it on a rotisserie, that way we can flip it up on its side. I might try to get the wheel wells scanned, and maybe I can get some molded pieces in there. I'll also show you guys when the stock fender liners come in, if we can make those work or not, but I'm thinking we should just block off the headers and leave it, because it's been working. There really hasn't been any issues, and we'll fix the mud flaps and move on. So that's what we're gonna do. All right, guys, I didn't record much of that process because we already talked about it the other day, and then I ended up backtracking. So here's what we got. I just put some self-etching primer on it. It's basically just the design that I used to use, which is this plastic piece that goes in, but obviously it melts from the heat. So rather than doing a complicated setup, I just made it out of metal so it won't melt. And then I picked up some, where'd it go? Some very high temperature black paint so that it doesn't rust. And then I'm gonna move on. So this is the inside of it. It actually goes on the passenger side of the car like this. There's 3 nutsert holes, and then this rests on the skid plate, so it won't come out. This notch is in here for the pass-through for some of the wiring, and also so you can access the tow hook and tow strap in case they break.